Welcome to another edition of Creating Mixed Media with Lynn MacDonald. Today we're working on a project that I did for the StencilGirl blog. And what I'm working with is some Stampbord tiles. And I'm actually just using a sponge dauber tool to pounce through the stencil with some ink from Quick Quotes. I love their powder puff ink pads. And just pouncing through the stencil to get the images onto the tiles. I've attached the tiles to a canvas just using some beacon adhesives, the 3-in-1 adhesive. And through the magic of video, of course, now it's finished. But you can see I've made a mistake here where I got a fingerprint onto the tiles. So because these are Stampbord tiles, they have a clay surface. So I can actually just use a little emery board or a nail file or low grit sandpaper to remove the mistake and re-stencil over to fix it. It's a wonderful surface because you have that oopsie factor. For the second part of this project, I am going to use some chalkboard spray ink to color the canvas underneath. Of course, I've already attached my tiles, so everything's going to get a nice coating of this beautiful orchid color. So get underneath and get all that area of the raw canvas. And then just use a rag to wipe it off the top of the surface. See? And now we don't have raw canvas staring at us anymore. Nice purple there. The reason I used raw canvas here is because later on we'll be doing encaustic, and I didn't want to have to use encaustic gesso to prime. So it will adhere better to the raw canvas than it would to anything primed. Now we're just going to use a large background stamp. I love big honkin' stamps because you can get so much done so quickly. And this is the new Memento Luxe ink in elderberry. We'll place the stencil back down and stamp through it. Now, stamping on canvas and on these tiles, it's like stamping on one of those cheap folding tables. You will never get the entire image when you try to stamp with it. So the best you can hope for is to get partial, and that's why I like these big stamps, because I only want a partial image. I only want every now and then to see the stamp design come through. And that's what we'll get, a nice mix of blank spaces and spaces that have the design. Now if we want to cheat a little bit and get some of the stamped image through the center, what I'm doing here is I'm going to put the stamp down, and then I'm actually going to lift the whole thing up and put my fingers underneath the canvas while holding the stamp in place, and just literally push through the bottom of the canvas so that I can get the canvas to come more in surface with the stamp image. And when we do that, then we'll get more design onto the canvas. See? Now we're going to have some fun with one of my favorite new tools, the Gelli Arts printing plate. Most of the time you see people use this, they're using it with acrylic paint. I'm doing something very different today, something that I haven't done before. But I was messing around with the idea and it worked great, so let's play. I'm going to remove just the front cover off the Gelli plate, leave the back cover in place because I'm putting it over my wrapped canvas so that we can see better. And then I'm going to apply sort of a medium, if you will, which is an alcohol-free hand sanitizer. And I'm putting this down here along with some Copic various reinkers. Now, these are alcohol ink. You could use alcohol ink from Ranger. You could use marble ink from Viva Decor. Lots of different choices. I'm going to use the Copic reinkers today. So starting just putting a layer of the gel hand sanitizer down. And then I'm going to use this little tool to just get it sort of iced all over the plate. Notice the tool has rounded edges. I don't want to use anything with a sharp edge on top of this plate. We don't want to cut into it. You could use a credit card, hotel room key. This is just a divider from one of my little IKEA trays that I like to use for this. So just kind of getting it flattened out there. And then we're going to take the reinkers and just drip them around. And The importance is to not use alcohol in your hand sanitizer because you don't want it to react with the gels. I just want everything to kind of spread the way that it normally would and not fight each other off. So we'll start with the purple, add some of the teal in sort of the negative spaces. It's just playtime. You can't do anything wrong with this. And then finally we're going to get this sort of red-violet. Just a little drop will do every now and then. Isn't that just pretty? And you can see everything sort of just smearing out all by itself. I love it. Don't even have to work. Now, what I like about the gel medium is, first, you could use pouncing tools to like remove things, but the gel medium actually retains shape, whereas alcohol inks on just a craft surface would not retain shape. So when I pull these Princeton brush tools through it, it's going to retain that shape. It's going to have swirls and stripes and just let everything sort of move within those little gutters that I'm creating. And so now I can really play with it and make a fun print. And that's because of the gel medium. It's doing two things. It's allowing us to work with the alcohol ink and it's going to keep it wet. It's also protecting the jelly plate from getting stained, although staining doesn't hurt. And it's also allowing us to have texture. Now, this is different than what I would normally do with this, but I decided to play. So I'm taking the wrong side of the stencil, and I'm going to actually transfer these beautiful colors into the negative spaces on my project. So I'm just going to place that down. Make sure it's got contact with the mat, peel it off, and then we will transfer it to our project. Let's get this out of the way because we're going to play with that later. Okay. Just placing it over the image into the negative spaces. Once again, I might use a credit card or maybe even a rubber brayer just to make sure that the stencil is getting good contact with the project so that the ink will transfer to the project. All right, let's see what we get. It's so cool. So now we have this really great marble pattern in the negative spaces. How fun is that, huh? And that actually will dry all by itself, and we'll let it dry while we're cooking up some encaustic medium here. This is some encaustic medium. You can get it from R&F. You can get it from Clairvoyant Encaustics. It is not just beeswax. It is encaustic medium, which it has beeswax and Damar resin in it. We'll talk later about why that's important. So everything's dry here. And now I'm going to start playing with, oh, there's my hat, playing with the fun of Stampbord, which is that you can easily remove, kind of through a scratch art, you can remove everything. So I'm going to, and I'm just outlining some of the little places, and I'm going to scratch them, and I'm going to just do a little bit of busy work here, but to get some contrast. So just using a little stylus tool or a paper piercer, or you can actually invest in the scratch art tools from Ampersand Art for this purpose. And I'm just going around and outlining just random shapes. So you can outline, you can do cross hatching. It's all about creating contrast at this point. So we're actually removing ink wherever our stylus touches at this point. You can see a little bit better some of the removal there. And I'm going to outline around several more of those. And now the stamp boards themselves, I want to sand the edges lightly so that I get a white edge around each of them just to make them stand out a little bit more from the background. Doesn't take much work, but it gets a nice little contrast again against the background and makes the tiles stick out individually. have to admit to a little bit of an oops here. I did apply some encaustic medium over the top of the tiles and let it cool, and now I'm actually going to reheat it just to have that flatten out a little bit more. And you can see it also fuses the encaustic medium back to the layers if you reheat it after you've applied it. So you can see it melting again on the tiles. And it was just brushed over the top, but reheating it fuses it to the surface, and it also allows it to flatten out a little bit more. Once it gets hot, it just goes really fast. So I'm just using my heat tool actually to blow the stuff around. And the moment I move away from one area, you'll see it start to cloud up again because it's recooling. But that's the point. It's just a really low melting encaustic medium. At this point, we're done with our surface manipulation. We can't really get back to the tiles. So once you're done with all of your scratchaways and adding ink to the tiles, now the encaustic medium seals it all in. And then we can actually start playing with the surface of the encaustic medium itself. Now that the surface is cooled, I'm going to use a different stencil, the wrought iron gate stencil, with some pan pastels to embellish the top of the encaustic medium. Now see, pan pastels aren't something that I would normally use on Stampbord because it's not a rough enough surface, but encaustic medium and pan pastels love each other. So it's really easy to apply, and it just has a brilliant look to it. So I'm using the copper metallic pan pastel with one of their soft tools to apply it over the stencil and onto the encaustic medium on the tiles. One of the things I discovered as I was making this was, as I was applying the pan pastels through the stencil, some of the pan pastel was getting in between the tiles onto the purple of the canvas, and actually I love how that looks. So I just said, okay, keep going, be messy, because it's really kind of cool the way the purple and the copper came off against each other. Sorry for my hat getting in the way of the camera. I'm going to have to watch out for that next time. Once you remove the stencil, you can see the beautiful detail that the copper offset so nicely onto the medium and against the beautiful background of the purples and the teal. And it just has a wonderful, picks up all the detail and still gives us such a nice contrast with the metallic finish. I found a word I wanted to apply, peeled a couple pieces of encaustic medium off of my craft sheet and melted them onto the word, and then picked it up with some tweezers and placed it on top of the canvas and let it adhere. In this close-up you can really see the scratched off areas. You can get a better idea of what it looks like. And I adhered a key and a keyhole just with Beacon 3-in-1 adhesive to different areas of the tiles. And that's our finished project, a 4 by 12 inch canvas with Stampbord and StencilGirl. Thanks for watching.